Hey everybody, welcome to LTG Live.
Yeah.
My name is Aaron Holt. I'm with my good friend and co-host Peter Reeves. What's
Hello.
up, bro? We the champions. We the
Let's
champions.
go. This
Let's
is
go.
LeBron's championship, and we're going to the tippy top, man. For the MVP too. This is beautiful. This is beautiful. Somebody said to me, they said Jordan went 6 times and he won 6 times. LeBron went 10 times, and this is only his 4th one. I said, listen, the competition is different. The NBA is way more elite, and I repeat, way more elite.
We promise we're going to talk about something spiritual that's going to be so helpful for you, your life, and your ministry, and your family. But we just had to get that off our chest right now, right? Because you know, Peter, I just want to say this: no one ever disputes that Tom Brady is the GOAT, but he wasn't undefeated in Super Bowls. Come on!
Wow! What a point!
You know, I just blew your mind.
This is why you get the big bucks, man. Come on, yeah, right. So good.
I can't believe you didn't show up with a Lakers jersey on today. Like,
dude, I was this close. My wife was like, "You need to tone it down, buddy. Tone it down." I was like, "You have no idea."
So good, so good. Well, hey, listen, we're so glad that you joined us. We got a bunch of you that are with us live right now, and if you've never been with us before, welcome to the LTG Live podcast. So we live stream on multiple Facebook streams as well as YouTube. And then also this will be made available as a podcast later. This is brought to you by leadthegeneration.com. You can go to our website. You can check out what we do. We are all about resourcing, equipping, and training, developing both the youth pastor and the student leader at the local church, right?
Absolutely.
And so we're excited that you've taken some time to be with us today. Before we introduce our guest today and our topic, which you already know because we already posted about, this is going to be a great topic, Peter. Especially, I was thinking, Peter, like this topic is for you because you just went from like no kids to 3 kids in 1 year. So right, really did this one for you, bud. But we're going to talk keeping your marriage and family healthy in ministry here with our guest, who we'll introduce in just a moment. But I wanted to let you know who's going to be on the broadcast next week. The one and only Reggie Dabbs is going to be with us. Let's go. I said to Reggie today, I'm like, hey, what topic do you want to hit next week? And he just texted me back, great. That was it. I was just like, it's Reggie. He can talk about whatever he wants to talk about. It's going to be great, right? That's just the way that it works.
Great.
So we're super excited to have Reggie with us. And we want to encourage those of you that are watching right now, do a couple things for us, right? First of all, feel free to ask your questions in the comments. We don't want this just to be a conversation between 3 guys on a live stream. We want to hear from you. So feel free, even right now, if you'd like to, go ahead and drop your name or where you're watching from in the comments, because we'd love to see your contact information come up here on the screen, right? And we just want to welcome you. And so feel free throughout today's broadcast to ask lots of questions. We're excited to take your questions and have you be a part of this conversation. If you're looking to follow along with Lead the Generation on Instagram, you can find us at LTG Conference. And then one more favor, if you love what's going on, the content blesses you, give us a share, give us a like, follow along in future weeks. This is season 2 of LTG Live. We got a lot of great guests coming, but I'm excited about today's. He's a great friend of mine, great friend of yours, Peter. And today we're going to talk with Steve Tripp, who is the district youth director for the Wisconsin and Northern Michigan Ministry Network of the Assemblies of God. We're talking keeping your marriage and family healthy in ministry. Steve, how are you? It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
It is awesome to be here. And I feel like I should have my son on this with me so we can go toe-to-toe on this Laker LeBron nonsense.
Steve, what are you saying?
I knew that was going to happen. I knew it was coming. Peter. I should have warned you.
Wait, me and Steve have a lot of history, and I have no idea that we were in Africa together, and we spent a lot of time talking about different things, and I had no idea this is how he felt about the king. I'm not talking about Jesus. I'm talking about LeBron.
You just poked the bee's nest today. I just need you to know that you poked the bee's nest. Yeah,
I am like number one hater for LeBron when it comes to comparison to him and Michael. Hey, here's what I'll say. Post game interview. Hey, AD, what do you think right now? Oh man, we just did this for Kobe. Hey, LeBron, what do you think? I need my respect.
I knew it was coming. As soon as he said that,
Wow.
I thought, yeah, all the haters are going to hate right now.
They
Yeah,
are,
it's just-
man.
I hope there's some watching. I need some backup on this.
You need
so.
some backup.
Yeah.
Hey,
Come on.
yeah,
Here's
go
what I say:
ahead.
celebrate. The Bible says, "Cry with those who are crying, celebrate with those who are celebrating."
There
I
you
will
go. There you
celebrate
go.
with you.
Hey,
Come on.
hey, Julie thinks you're a great man of God, Peter, and I don't know. Maybe it's because you're spiritual. Maybe it's because you're a LeBron fan. I'm not sure.
Julie is amazing.
It's one of those right there. Yeah, feel free to comment on the LeBron Jordan controversy. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about that because we could dedicate an entire season of podcasts just directly to that. But we're going to talk about something that's a whole lot more important, right? We're going to talk about keeping your marriage and family healthy in ministry. And man, guys, I think that this is always an important topic. It always should be an important topic, but maybe during this year, even more so with all that we have all experienced universally in regards to the year 2020. It's posed a lot of unique challenges to us. And I've heard some that have talked about how some of the quarantine seasons actually were beneficial to them and actually, provided some opportunities for them to work on aspects of marriage and family that maybe they didn't always have the time to do. And then I've heard others that have had the opposite experience. And so we're not necessarily with our guest today, with Steve, we're not necessarily going to dive into the specifics, context of COVID and how that affects, although it'll probably come out. We're just going to talk a lot of practical thoughts from your experience. Been married for quite a while, have raised some amazing kids, served in ministry for quite a while. You're the kind of guy that we want to talk to on this kind of topic, right? Because you've got some things to say, and that's not for us to prop you up as perfect, right? Because we could bring your wife on and she could
she'll set that straight,
right? Yeah, she will. But I've known you for years, and there's been some things you've said to me over the years in various settings that have been helpful for me personally in my marriage, Julie and I, and with our family. And so I think it got a lot to offer. And so I just want to kick it to you, Steve, and Peter and I are just going to sit back and we're going to learn. We're going to take notes, ask questions. Go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say, before we get started, this is such a relevant topic because I was obviously doing some research on this topic, and I came across this study in 2013. So I imagine that these statistics haven't improved. I imagine they've gotten worse. This was in 2015. By the Gallup Group. It says 80% of pastors feel that their ministry has negatively affected their family. 80% of this pool of 250,000 pastors that they interviewed. 80% of those pastors' wives wish that their spouse would have chose a different profession.
Wow.
And 50% of those pastors' marriages, they're like with the data they have, they say will probably end in divorce. So this is a topic that we need to talk about. Whether you've been in ministry for a long time and you have some secrets of what you've done, post those in the comments, or you're new to this ministry thing, you're maybe single or you're newly married. This topic is relevant because it's so important to what we do, to who we are, and where God's calling us to go. So, Steve.
Yeah, so great. Yeah. So once again, let me just say this. We want to hear your comments. We want to hear your questions. We want to take your questions. And this is a relevant topic. So go ahead and give this stream a like and give it a share. And let's just spread the word. Steve, thanks for joining us today. What are some of your thoughts? You kind of emailed me some notes beforehand, but I'll just let you kind of ease your way into the topic. And then you have a whole list of tips that we have ready to go. We might get through all of them or just some of them, but we'll hit as many as we can in the time that we have.
Yeah. This is the most important conversation I ever have with. I'd work with a lot of interns over the years, or guys or gals that are coming in and interested in pursuing ministry. And at some point, I have this talk with all of them. I'm like, listen, who you choose to spend your life with, who you choose to have join you in ministry, there's nothing that will shape your life in ministry more than that right there. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I think about marriage specifically is the longer you're in a relationship with someone, the more the truth comes out. So, we all know when you're dating all the way up to even married, but you start living together, you start paying bills, experience stress together, you have the habits that drive each other crazy. The truth just comes out more and more. So if you come in thinking, this is what it's going to be like, start to finish, then you're set up for failure. And so, so I think there's a lot that you can help people saying, hey, we're just discovering the truth about each other, and I'm in for whatever that is, but also, before we jump into some ideas, it's very rarely that I go through a season doing what I do now where there aren't people in ministry reaching out just in difficult places.
Right.
And I think that family stress, when you have stress in your marriage or in your family, it kills everything.
Yeah.
Because you think about that. If things aren't right with your wife, how productive in ministry are you really going to be? That's whenever there's stress like that, at least for me, or if my kids are going through something, I just sit there and go, man, I can't really focus on anything else because there's something broken here. So yeah. So going back to the very beginning, when we first got married, my wife and I, we were friends for quite some time. We dated for 3 years. We knew each other, and we were in Minneapolis at North Central University, and we end up going.
I see you representing there today.
Yeah, that's right.
Go Rams.
Yeah. And so we go to this town of like 1,000 people in northern Missouri, and it's as country gets, and I remember plopping down there and just thinking, I can't believe it. They're paying me. Not a lot, but they're paying me to do this. Right. And I'm living large, and I can't wait to go to work, and I stay longer than I should. And I come home to my wife, who's, you can only unpack and set up your house so many different times. And I would actually come home for lunch, and it was almost like she was hanging on to my leg saying, please don't leave me alone here. So we're having very different experiences at the get-go. And, I thought we just arrived at our dream. What I really arrived at was kind of my dream. And so we learned a lot, or I learned a lot in that stretch where, she was a teacher, so it took until that fall before she started having something to kind of go do. And we had to figure out how to have conversations like that. So the other piece is I would come home from work and be kind of spent, and she'd saved up all the conversation for the day, and I'm like, what I was really looking for was, can I get a half an hour of Sports Center, and then I'm all in with you. And
he just wanted to watch LeBron highlights.
Well, you'll get them today. There will be no shortage of LeBron. But yeah. So what I figured out in that season, or what we figured out in there, was number one, you just got to be emotionally present. Because I was for a long time was a believer in the multitasking thing. Like I could do two things at the same time just because I could repeat back what you were saying, and I think we all know this, but being fully present doesn't just mean sitting down and locking eyes. It just means you're invested and as long as that other person knows that, you're good to go, and that's the other thing I think, so I'm a hunter, right? And when I go out and I spend time either in my stand or on the mountains, wherever I go, where I'm isolated like that, I really realize the weaknesses in my game. When it comes to being a dad, when it comes to being a husband, I'm like, you know what? I'm seeing that. And so, which goes to show I'm emotionally present with my own thoughts and with God during that time. So when you're that way with your spouse or your kids, guess what? You're going to get real interaction and kind of know where you're at instead of just kind of passing each other, going through the motions. So
I remember one of those moments when I was, acting present, acting as if I was listening while looking at my phone, and hearing my wife say to me, "I want you to listen with your eyes." And I've always remembered that. And this is one of the things that you said to me, Steve. I can't quite remember the context in one of our groups that we coach or whatever, but it was just this idea of don't just be present, be emotionally present. That really hit me. Like, I need to work on that. I have unfortunately mastered the art of appearing to be present from the outside, but not emotionally being fully present. Peter, do you see yourself there in the mix somewhere, or
Oh,
struggle with that?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The thing that's helped me the most, especially deal with this, because I am a multitasker too, man. I think that's why we click so much, or we are pretty good at the same things, is just being an active listener. So not just listening to respond, but listening and asking clarifying questions. So that I feel like, when especially with my wife, when we're like in the heat of things, that when I start asking clarifying questions, I think she knows, like, oh, he's listening. He's locked into what's happening. And when I'm not asking those clarifying questions, it's very obvious. I'm like, yeah, sure. I heard you. So that I think is huge. Number one, super big, for just leaders in general to be emotionally present. So.
And I think I was going to say, and I think you have to feel what they're feeling. And I'm not a feeler. So that's just work on my end. Like, it's not always what she's saying. It's like right now she's teaching, and our teachers are, this COVID stuff is really tough on them as far as the amount of work they have to do. And so, I have to feel what she's feeling when she's talking about work or talking about those scenarios, or even how she views COVID. And so for her, if she gets exposed, it's 2 weeks of being at home and teaching through a camera to first graders. And she's not about that, And so I have to not just feel the regular stress. That's specific to her. And so then you got to adapt accordingly. But yeah, that feeling piece it takes a while to figure that out. 'Cause in general, my personality as a guy is like very binary. I said this, I meant that,
Right.
And there's more nuance for her. So I got to figure that out.
I think that's, Steve, why you had a hard time with LeBron asking for respect, because you're not really. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
feeling his pain. Yeah.
This is what I wanted to say, though, because I think this first point, be emotionally present, is huge, not only in marriage, but it's huge in parenting as well. Mm-hmm. So let me just double click on it with you again, but apply this to parenting and raising a healthy family and ministry.
Yeah. I don't know if it's easier with your wife, but your vantage point, right, as a parent is like, I'm here and I'm in charge, and so sometimes their feedback is like, yeah, but you catch yourself going, oh, that you're just a kid. And there are times where that's exactly it. But there are other times where they're reaching out and you're not connecting, or you're not feeling that. And that's a real dangerous thing with your kids. So being emotionally present with them it can be difficult, especially when they're initiating it. You better be there, because we know it's easy for them to kind of disengage. And for some of your kids, I have 4 kids, and one of mine, it would be very much all the time available. And one or two of the others, it might be like, hey, that happened, last week, and I gotta connect during that time. Otherwise, it might be another week before they're ready to do that. And emotionally present is also kind of reading between the lines on what they're feeling, as well. So it's,
really good. So go to this next one, Steve.
Okay.
Facilitate moments and opportunities. What do you mean by that?
So I think that sometimes we need to help each other out, right? So there's all the love language studies and different things, and how I talk about it like, this is just how my kids are wired, or my wife is wired. And I want to create moments or opportunities for, I'm not an artist, but I really do get the idea of, the sculptor who just he chisels away everything to allow what was there to come out. You've heard that. Mm-hmm. I look at that as, especially with my kids, it's just, God's wanting to do this. So can I create moments or environments or opportunities that are going to pull that out of them, instead of just tell them, hey, this is what you do. This is what happens. This is who you become. Man, I don't think that really works. I think that discovery is a big part of that. So I want to create an environment where they feel safe to share. I want to create an environment where they learn how to express and communicate. And so what do I do by that? If they disagree with me and push back, if I'm like, hey, I'm dad, your son, shut up and listen. Well, that environment's been created now. So yeah.
I think that's really important, man. I just feel like moments are such like I don't remember life in like, you know, like you remember the moments that you've had with people. Like, I don't remember even some of the hurtful, like I have positive memories with even people who have said negative things to me, right? Like I don't remember like some people gravitate towards those negative feelings, but I remember the moments that I had. Like when I think of you, right? Like I remember the moments we had riding in that bus, just bouncing around, like and just how we were trying to stay. And I remember you having your foot up with your, you know, just kind of like embracing every bump. Like those little things to me matter, and I think to maximize on the moments, like is important for every part of leadership. It's important for like just being a leader amongst your team, but for your family, like my little daughter, she's only 2 years old, but she knows that on Wednesdays we get cake pops. You know what I mean? And that's like our moment. And like she'll just look at you and go, pop, pop, pop. And you're like, are you talking about your grandfather? No, she's asking for a cake pop. That's our time together. And just like she'll remember that. And it's in those moments that I'm able to create memories with my kids, with my wife. I'm listening, you know, I'm even just planning. Like Joanna, you know, she said to me, she said, you know, I've been asking you to take me to New York for Christmas for 3 years and we have not gone, right? So now I'm like, okay, this is happening this year, COVID or no, we are going to New York, right? Like I want to be the kind of dad, husband, father, leader who brings people into some of the greatest moments of their life, who bring my kids into some of the greatest moments of their life. It's a big deal. And that's what they're going to remember, you know?
So I have a couple of stories. I do think you have to create a lot of moments. And then I think there are others you have to just capitalize on. Okay. So you guys know, so I go hunting in Missouri every year. All 4 of my kids have gone with me. And I take them out of school. We go down there for a week and it's just me and them, dad time, so to speak.
Yeah.
Only my, you know, the first 2 they didn't hunt even. It was just being with dad, you know? And so that was just this moment we created. The fun one is Macy, our youngest. She's a junior in high school now, but when she was like 6 years old, there was this commercial from Disney that was like, hey, it's your birthday. Come to Disney World for free, right? So she saw that commercial and she's like, sweet, I get to go to Disney World for my birthday, you know?
For free.
Yeah, for free. And so, you know, she puts that out to mom and dad. And if you know her, she's just a sweet little thing. And so we're like, oh, that's cute. She just doesn't know what we do for a living, you know? We can't take the whole family to Disney World. But then Christy and I started talking about it. And I just was like, well, what if you and Macy went down for her birthday? And the immediate hurdle was, well, what are the other 3? There's no way we can be like, they already think she's our favorite or whatever, you know, I mean, all that stuff. And we started diving down and just said, one of the things we think is, in life, can you genuinely be happy for something that goes well for somebody else? Right. You know what I'm saying? And in the case of LeBron, no, I can't, but I'm working on it. So what we did, we sat down with each of the other siblings by themselves and we're like, hey, how would you feel? And remember, they're kids, you know, and to a T, you could see it going through their mind. And they're like, you know, I would be jealous, but I would really be happy for Macy.
Yeah.
So we did this whole thing and she goes to Disney with mom. And I think we're not super parents, believe me. We just capitalized on a moment where we sensed something was happening. And then out of that, we're like, man, we have been handicapped by thinking all of these kids have to have the same experience or we can't do it.
Yeah.
So from there, then I take Gunnar to a Vikings game, and I take Lexi to the Mall of America, and I try to take Kaylee to a Coldplay concert. Finding out what their thing is, and just kind of creating that moment
I
one-on-one.
love that.
Just
So good.
was amazing for that. And so I think you can capitalize on those. And then the last one I'll say in regards to on a little more negative experience that I had to adjust to was my oldest was little, and I was a firstborn, and I fell in the trap of doing what we do with firstborns, and I just wanted to make her perfect. And so I was being pretty tough on her, just like correcting. And I'm like, oh, I don't want her to, miss all these things. And then she was doing some things where she got in a little bit of trouble or whatever, and it was deserved, but it wasn't major. And I remember being in a room with her, and she was in trouble, and she was a little girl. And I kind of disciplined her and talked to her about it. And in my gut, I just knew as I was walking out the door, I'm like, listen, I just felt like I was breaking my little girl. Like she was just at a point where, I sensed she's like struggling with, can I do anything right in Dad's eyes? Even though that wasn't true, there wasn't enough to support it. She was feeling that. And I think the Spirit let me know that. I went back over to her and I just said, hey, you got in trouble for doing something you shouldn't have done, but Daddy didn't have to do this way. And I just said, I want you to know, I'll love you. I'll always love you. Just reinforced her. And I know like the hug she gave me at that point communicated what was in my gut was dead on, And so I created a moment, or out of that, I capitalized on a moment of saying, man, would I humble myself to the point where I would be the one to say, hey, Daddy didn't do the best right here, and I want to reinforce this. So I think you have to create those and facilitate those. Or I just, being in youth ministry, you see these dads with their kids, and you're like, how can I feel like they hate each other. How did that happen? And I think, there's something in Scripture talks about where we just put more on people and kind of pushing them past that spot. So a lot of talk about stuff that in hindsight, those are a couple that I noticed the Lord was at work, and I just had to kind of get out of the way, or in most cases, just humble myself in that. So
That's cool.
I love that you're talking about how it's an intentional process. And I think sometimes we tend to wait for the moment to come. And there are times where you do just kind of naturally find the moment. But then there's also the opportunity to create the moment, create the family tradition, or create the Disney World experience, or the concert experience, or or whatever. I love that. I think that speaks volumes to each of us, and is a reminder to each of us to say, like, hey, there's both sides of this that we have to work on, which is so helpful for us. Steve, here's another one of the things that you said in the notes when you sent them to me. You said this right here: rarely do I separate family and ministry. We are in ministry. So unpack that one for us, because I think a lot of us struggle at times to figure that out. Like, we talk about the balance between ministry and family, and we all tend to have two job incomes type situations and families. Now, my wife is a elementary principal. Your wife is a teacher, right? Peter, your wife is new mom and also youth pastoring, and so we live in a busy culture. So, what are your thoughts on this one? When you talk about we are in ministry?
Yeah, we with my wife, I didn't ever want her to feel like I was choosing between her and my ministry. And I think that if you allow that, that's, I think, where, Peter, your stats are coming from. If either spouse feels like they're on the other side of this, like it's me versus ministry, they're for sure going to wish they never went in ministry, and that's not just ministry. That's any career. You know, if you just if the other person feels like this is a separate thing that you do, there's going to be opportunity for resentment. So, and I wouldn't say that she was always, you know, there's a lot of spouses that are just not upfront or even really in the forefront. But that's what we did as a family. So I'll give the example, like when we became DYDs, we have 6 weeks of camp here in the summer, 2 weeks on a missions trip. That's your summer's kind of gone,
summer.
You know?
Yeah.
And so we just were like, hey, this is what we do. And so I had little kids and they're on the campgrounds and they're riding golf carts and I'm buying them ice cream cones and, you know,
and you're making moments.
And they're meeting all of the uncles and aunts that they have that are our youth pastors. And we just chose to be like, hey, yeah. And I probably will go too far with this, but our kids are into sports, but they didn't, we tried travel year baseball with my son, who's a pretty good little ball player, and it didn't take. He wanted to be out at camp with his family. And so we just made that, like, this is what we do. And I'll probably even go a little far here and say there was an opportunity for us to maybe consider doing something else at one point. And it wasn't super serious, but enough that I felt like, hey, we got to talk to the kids. And I talked to them about it. And the first question from all of them was, well, what about camp?
Wow.
You know, so whatever it is, they saw that ministry as ours. And I think when we compartmentalize, I would be in trouble. I'd just say it that way.
Peter, how are you doing that with 3 very young kids right now? I'm just interested. I think people will be interested to see what your journey is with that and how you're trying to put that into practice.
Yeah, we are doing it, man. Like we will risk the spirituality of a moment to have our kids in the room. So I might have all of 3 of them in the room and we're in a prayer meeting and I'm up on stage and my little daughter will run up on stage and everyone will get distracted. And then she'll stand up there while I pray in front of our leaders. You know, it's important for me to see that. It keeps me, I know this is a weird thought, but it keeps me accountable because I want them to see me in those spaces and at home in the same temperament and the same tone. And I have a propensity as a leader who like I'm just always trying to go for it to give more grace to strangers than I do to my family. And not separating them and saying like, this is what we do has been super beneficial for me as a young minister. So the way we do it, man, is honestly like we have to have good systems with 3 under 3. So we have great systems of when we bring them in and when they're eating and we don't sacrifice the times with them, like us eating dinner together on a Wednesday night for the sake of the ministry. Like we just don't do it. Like we hold, you know, the thing we have to sacrifice is me coming home late. So we try to keep things in place that make them feel like, no, I'm special, I'm important. And I know they can't comprehend it yet, but we'll be able to tell them like, no, we always held you as the priority. Just knowing that like, even at 2 years old, she knows like on Wednesdays we're at church. Like they're not staying at home. They don't have a babysitter at home. They're coming to church with us, you know? So
awesome. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't feel like I have a good answer around that question yet as we're still developing it, but our system is to have them here, to have them visible, present, around, laughing, giggling. You know, when she starts worshiping, the whole room just like explodes. So it's just cool stuff, you know? So.
Well, Peter, the system you have is the one that works for right now.
Yep.
And it'll evolve from season to season. And that's how I would answer the same question I asked to you. If I'm answering that question, I would say you have to identify what the opportunities you have. What are the opportunities you have in whatever the season is in which you're in?
Yeah.
Like, so for me, right now, the greatest opportunity I have, you know, our son is married and he's out of the house, but I still have 2 teenagers living with us, 18 and 15. The greatest opportunity I have right now to spend time with them is driving to and from school. So I could put her on the bus and that would get me more sleep and I would enjoy that. But the conversations that I'm able to have in a 20-minute ride to school, to and from home, that's I'll pay whatever I have to pay in the gas pump in order to create those just little tiny moments and opportunities. So you just adjust. And if you understand the principle of what Steve is saying here, of like leveraging these moments, and we're in this together and we are family, then you just learn how to apply that to whatever the season is. Just like what you referenced, Steve, when you said, when it comes to camp, like this was a big part of our family. And so we're going to leverage this.
I think
Steve,
that's so good. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Peter. Yeah.
I was going to say, like, even Steve, like, I just love that your kids are so aware of the importance of camp. It shows that they can see what you see in terms of value. And I think that's a part of keeping your family healthy in ministry. It's like, we value the same things, right? If you want to keep an organization healthy, you got to make sure you communicate the value so that everyone's on the same page. And like when your kids ask you that in a moment where transition could have been possible, they're like, what about camp? It's a value for them. And even in my 2-year-old, like I see this as a value because, and this was actually pretty impressive. So at the end of at a night or something, she'll go, "Daddy, say amen," because she knows it's time to close.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's just so crazy to me, like that that you've paid enough attention, that you've watched me move in this space enough to know, "Daddy, say amen. It's time." You know what I mean?
Make sure you don't ever forget that, Peter. Write that down. You're gonna use that for the rest of your life, man.
I love that so much, man. Because she's starting to learn what we value, right? Like, and it's getting ingrained in her, and she's still our foster daughter, so she's not our daughter yet. We haven't had the chance to adopt them, but it's just so beautiful that her value system is being developed right now in the fact that we do ministry together. It's not separate. It's not this box that, oh, Daddy goes and he does this thing over here and we have no idea about it. It's like, no, Daddy, say amen. I know. It's beautiful.
As you're talking, there are two things I thought. First of all, looking at where you're at, Peter, the biggest danger in that, looking backwards and looking at all of the examples I've been around, the biggest danger is for moms to dive into their kids if dad's doing work, and all of a sudden now their role is they lose sight of being spouses because of the stage you're in, because where you're at, those kids need undivided attention, and it doesn't happen accidentally and all that stuff. So I always just tell people, and be careful that you don't lose sight of each other during that season, because there's an assumption, well, we'll get it back after this, and some do and some don't, and I just don't know that that's, like you're saying, and that's where I would go, you're modeling to those kids that relationship as well, dad and mom and their marriage. And then I think the other piece is, like, I listen to all these really great leaders that talk about, or my dad always said this, or I always tell my kid this, and I'm thinking, I'm not a mantra guy really. But I do think in reality, I think way more things are caught than taught. And so my daughter works with Feed My Starving Children. That's not a surprise. She's been around that kind of thing her whole life. My son, when he was at North Central, he'd go broke walking the streets because anybody who asked him for money, he'd be like, well, I have money. So, he just, and so we never sat down and said, hey, this is what you guys do, or this, but if you create those environments, they catch that along with the Holy Spirit, so to take the pressure off those that don't feel like they're the best at family devotions or having mantras, they're way more paying attention to what you're doing anyway. So,
that's so good.
That's really good.
Hey, for those of you that maybe joined us halfway through the broadcast, we're talking with Steve Tripp, the district youth director for the Wisconsin and Michigan Ministry Network of the Assemblies of God. Man, that's a long title.
Yeah.
But more importantly, we're talking about how to keep your marriage and family healthy while in ministry. And we got a couple minutes left. We'd love to take some of your questions. For those of you that are watching on the stream right now, some of you will catch us on our podcast version of this, which you can get on both Apple and Spotify platforms. But if you're with us now, feel free to jot your question down in the comment section. Steve, you gave me a whole list of different thoughts and ideas, and we won't get through all of them. No. But I'll just where do you want to go from here? Just take the conversation wherever you want to go. If we get some questions, we'll take questions. We've gone through about 3 of the 10 tips that you gave me. Feel free to just direct us to whatever you want to hit on your list there.
I think the next one is super easy. That doesn't take a lot to talk about. Is when I do premarital counseling, I ask them, when's the last time you admitted to the other person you were wrong about something? So the two phrases, I'm sorry and I was wrong. If you're like me and those are really hard things to say, then you need to, because you're going to need to say you're sorry and you're going to need to say you're wrong. And if that's really difficult for you, then, are you putting that other person first? So that's pretty obvious. And I think I just would throw that out. The other thing is like discovering the uniqueness of everybody in your family. Just because you're all in the same house and just because you share even DNA and all those kinds of things doesn't mean you're wired the same. And in this world of personality assessments, I think people are figuring out, oh, maybe that's why I process this way.
Right.
And as a parent and as a husband, I got to figure out, okay, I got to be aware of mine, but also aware of each one of my family, my wife and my kids. And I'm big on this. It's good for awareness, but not for allowance. So if whatever number of Enneagram you are is the one where you get to lose your temper and you're like, oh, cool. That I'm just a whatever number. I'm like, no, that's not how that works. So you be aware of it and then and figure it out. And then
so I was just going to say that again, though. It's good for awareness and not allowance. That's so huge.
Because we fall in love with it and we think about all of the things that make it. The other thing I'd say on those is that I know they don't like to do this, but I think you're better off having other people figure out your number than you, because we all self-correct, or we think about who we'd like to be. So
yeah, and that kind of ties into like the cultural, very secular, very humanistic, like, well, this, I am who I am, I can't change that about myself. Yeah. And so, I agree with you. There's great value in understanding your personality and your profile, but using that as a justification for bad behavior or unbiblical behavior, not good, not cool, not acceptable.
Yeah. Right. If you're aware, like I hate to, my kids always, they cringe whenever I'm on things like this because they think, oh, what's he going to say about me? But my oldest, there's no doubt, words of affirmation and quality time. And so if I'm aware of that, that's a great gift. Now I can know how to make her day. Why would I not want to do that?
Absolutely.
Even though I'm not necessarily wired to, that's not what I naturally go to in giving. Like, well, but I love her. Do I want her to feel the love like I feel it, or how she, it's just, it seems
Steve,
obvious.
I remember you and I were having a conversation one day about the compliments preachers want to get whenever they're done preaching their sermon, and most guys are like, that was fire. That was, and your compliment is like, you effectively preach the word of God. I was like, that's so good.
Yeah. And I picked that up from a pastor friend that I admired. He would be like, hey, you effectively communicated the gospel. And I'm like, that's really good, actually.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. I love
what else on your list here?
I think that's really good is don't reinforce others' expectations. And that ties in with defending and protecting your family, right? So if they have expectations on my wife or my kids and they're feeling pressure from that, I don't need to add to that. I need to actually defend and protect. And so I'm going to say some things that might be difficult because we might have even said these things or felt these things or believed these. But when I see, let's just, even Christians be like, hey, my son is going to be a mighty man of God. He's the next great preacher. I'm like, okay. But can you imagine what's going on in his heart and mind if he's not feeling that? And especially with the influence of a dad. I'm telling you, as a dad, our the power dads have is something else, man.
Yeah.
And so if he's like not really vibing that way, but feels like he has to do that for his dad, I think we fed something that maybe, because it's kind of feeling like there shouldn't be a necessity in that because God calls and God equips, and the Spirit's going to do that work better than I can. But if I push him down a road, I wonder if I unintentionally put others' expectations on him or her, and it happens both ways. So I would say, I remember one time growing up in a pastor's home where there was a board member or whatever that came to my dad about some stuff about me, and I'm sure what was funny was there was probably plenty of material. He just didn't pick something that was the right material about me.
Truth.
Yeah. So
truth. Facts for my life as well as a PK.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I remember what it felt like when Dad just said, "No, that's not how this is going to go," and stood up for me. That was just like, Peter, you were talking about how you have these memories of moments. That was a key one. I'm like, okay, he definitely didn't let that guy's expectation of me take a place it shouldn't in our family's lives. And so I think we need to do that. And it seems like that's always around behavior anyway, right? Which is kind of tricky anyhow.
Yeah.
So
Steve, hit this last one for us.
Okay.
I thought this was so good. You mentioned, that part of having healthy family and marriage and ministry is of avoiding unhealthy sabbatical thinking, in which I think I see Peter look on Peter's face like, oh, what's this one mean? But you and I talked about it a little bit before we went live, and I just thought, boy, this is a really, really important point here. So break this down for us.
So it's super touchy, and I don't want anybody who believes in sabbaticals to think I don't. I do. Okay. But I think
Peter, you can relax.
Yes,
you're
okay. But the idea of, and what I mean by unhealthy sabbatical thinking is, it's escapism, right? So like unhealthy, it's like, I need to get away and get things realigned and restructured. But if you go do that, and then you come back, what are you coming back to? You're coming back to the same thing, and all the habits that you had got you there. So it's like, I'm trying to best describe it. If Dad travels all the time, which I'm talking to, three of us travel a fair amount, right?
Yeah.
And all my kids, and I buy them really great gifts every time I go somewhere. I would be a fool to think they would choose those gifts over time with Dad or relationship with Dad. So I've got to figure out, okay, so how do I create something to effectively counter that? It's not going to be a gift that's going to counter that. And kids love gifts, don't get me wrong. But I would have to say, I have to pay attention to them. So unhealthy sabbatical thinking is, my wife and I need to go on a trip somewhere, and then our marriage is going to be square. Well, that's not really, it might be a good idea for you to do that, but you've got to change habits when you get back and do that. And so the other thing I hear a lot is, hey, it's, family's more important than ministry. And I agree with that wholeheartedly, but that doesn't mean I don't do my job. If I'm sitting in front of the TV, or I'm working out, or whatever I'm doing with all my free time, and I'm not paying attention to Christy during that time, and then I go and say, well, it's because of my job that I'm so busy that I don't have time for Christy, I'm not telling myself the truth, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of space around this thing that I think for young leaders is really where you've got to dive down and go, listen, this is who I am, and this is how we do it. And I've got to cut things that are hard. We don't just cut the easy things, Right. So,
Steve, I think what you're saying is create a life that you don't have to escape from.
Right.
Right. Like put things in place that are that you see would be beneficial, so that you don't have to escape from them, because running away from whatever you're facing is not going to change whatever you're facing. Like you could even come back with a new perspective, but still having to deal with what you left in place. So I think that's a really good point, and as a young leader, it makes me think like, okay, so what do I have to do to build the kind of life that I want to always consistently reside in, right? Like that my escape is not because I'm running from something, but I'm running I'm running together with my wife into something great, into a memory, not running from whatever I was dealing with. That's a really good point. I love that.
And I'll add a thought as an older leader, Peter, that I've been really chewing on in recent days. And I think I got this quote from Gerald Brooks just to give credit to it. But eventually, the habits you have produce the rewards of those habits.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't address it at the root level, you will always produce the same fruit, sabbatical or not, right, Steve?
Right.
That's ultimately what you're saying is you took a sabbatical so that you could prune the tree. But if you don't deal with the faulty root system,
right,
then you're going to regrow the same, you're going to reproduce the same harvest that you've always reproduced, whether it's the context of your family, context of your marriage, whatnot. Really, really good point there for us, Steve. Thank you.
Well, and I think I always, when I work with, whether it's marriage or ministry, if we can keep in our minds the moment we got that first job or she said yes or whatever, right?
Right.
And if we can build from that space, how many people have got into it and they're like, well, like I said at the beginning, time helps you discover the truth, right? So now all of a sudden this dream job I have, I find out the truth about that job. And what do I do with that? How do I create from that or move from that? I can all of a sudden be like, man, this job is so terrible. That pastor that I couldn't, I loved him. I couldn't wait to work with him. And now all of a sudden, he's the enemy. He's
right.
What happened there? Right. Like,
right. It changes.
We're responsible for where that goes and what we create. Same thing with our marriage. Like, well, I could have fixed it back here or, and I think when people, that unhealthy sabbatical is if you come home and you just sigh and you check out, you might be in trouble, Don't get me wrong. It's exhausting, but it should be so life-giving, right? We're responding to our calling. What a great, I don't know. I love it.
Can I just say something about this too? Like, I love talking to you guys because Aaron, I mentioned this, I think a couple weeks ago, but like it is, I just shared with some of our young adults about the power of embracing the mundane. Like, it's actually these mundane moments that lead to miraculous moments, and like fighting for the mundane, like embracing it totally. And I feel like that has a hint of what you're saying too, Steve. Like just being responsible, you can't be responsible for what other people do or how other people act, but you can be responsible for how you respond and how you respond to the moment. And I just feel like in a generation full of people who are constantly comparing themselves, this leads to some of the, I just need to get away, because if I get away, I can try to create what I saw that somebody else has, rather than dealing with where I'm at right now, what I'm going through and what's happening in my world. And I don't know, I just sense in you this attitude that I love. That's like, I'm just not going to run away from difficult things. I'm not going to allow difficult moments to tear me down. Like, I'm going to lean into them and figure out, like, I have to fix this. Like, I can run, but eventually I have to fix this because this is what God's called me to. He's called me to this church, to this pastor. And so I will survive until he tells me to move on. I love that. I just have a feeling of like, it brings confidence into my bones. Like, yes, like, like these mundane moments happen and you feel like there's not a lot of movement, but you continue to hold on. And I love that you use that word calling, because as a young leader, again, when I get stressed out, I start treating this like it's a job, and it's not. It's a calling, and that's totally different, So
last thought I think is just what you're chasing is to fill something that's missing, right?
Right.
Like so rather than figuring out what's missing and then allowing God to do that, maybe, and I see, I'm the most obsessive. Like, I don't start a lot of new things because if I start it, I'm going to do only that for the next however long. I have this highly addictive personality. I mean, thank God I never chased drugs. I would for sure be in a world of hurt. But I think it's you're sitting here going, okay, so how do I address what's missing? Yeah. And how do I have the Lord help me fill that, rather than, if you think about it, I mean, all of our habits, whether it's a phone or whatever else it is like there's something that feeds that might not be the most healthy way to do that. So Anyway, you guys are awesome, man.
Steve,
Thanks for pulling me
here's
on.
one question that came in. We got just enough time left to take this one question.
Okay.
If and anyone else is watching, if you got a question, put it in right now, because maybe we'll get to it. But this is from Zach Casper. He says, "My kids are growing up in the church like I did. My process of making my faith was an interesting process. How can we help our kids walk through that process?" Every pastor with kids wants to get the answer to this question right, because that's one of our greatest goals in life, is to see our own kids at least follow in our footsteps of having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. So, Steve, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I know and love Zach, and man, that thing. When you're an older guy, all of the younger ones want to know the answer to that. It's the greatest fear, and especially if they grew up in a pastor's home. Mm-hmm. So I think you can't overstate that modeling is more important than anything else. But the other piece of this that's scary is that behavior and how people process that is different, right? Yeah. So if I just look at behavior, I can get really discouraged.
Right.
And I can get falsely encouraged by behavior as well.
Facts.
So I think one of the things I did, my friend David Hertwick put together a gospel catechism as just a resource to, because I was not hey, family devotions every morning. Our mornings were like, if you can get out of here on time into school, we did.
That's a win.
We did this so well. We're closer to the Lord right now. So I think that walking through with questions they have, creating a space where they can ask them, and you don't just rebut them and case closed, has led to some crazy later in life conversations, because they'll go with you when they're in your house, but trust me, when they get out, what they're really thinking is going to come on there. And so I think figuring out how you processed, if they're similar to that, using that. But if they're not, I would find other people with similar personalities and be like, oh, hey, what were some keys for you? What were the voices you heard? Or what's the, because right now I know with one or two of my kids for sure, if I just come out and be like, listen, God's not about this. They're like, and come off intolerant. The culture they've grown up in is not going to have that kind of a conversation about it. And another one of mine is like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, I'm good with that. So helping your kids walk through that process is to make sure that they don't have to agree with you on everything, but they need to talk with you through that. And then I rarely talk about prayer. It's because it's an assumed and given. And I'm realizing that I probably need to reference that more. You've gotta invite God into that before. So anyway.
Well, you're talking about the culture you're creating in your family,
yeah.
and the type of relational foundation you're creating so that you can have those ongoing conversations with kids. Philosophically, I think that's a huge point for us to understand in parenting, in particular, is that we have to create ongoing conversations, not start and stop conversations. Right. It's a journey. Yeah. Faith is a journey. The conversation is a journey. Right. We all joke and laugh now about how, my parents gave me the talk, and it literally was that one talk, and as if one talk ever solved or explored, the totality of any, topic. So having ongoing conversations is huge. I would add to your list, Steve, and I know you'd agree with me on this anyways, I would add to your list, add other relationships into the lives of your own children as well, meaning your kids need not just you as a spiritual adult in their life, but they also need spiritual fathers and mothers from others, right? I needed that. You needed that. And I'd also too, I think one of the advantages we have, especially if you're listening to this and you are in youth ministry, you probably got some really quality kids in your youth ministry that you're looking at thinking, I'd be really happy if my kid turned out like that. Julie and I started to make it a practice where we would approach those kids and say, hey, would you build a relationship with our son or with our daughter or one of our daughters? and hang out with them and be like a big brother, big sister to them and really influence them in a healthy way. I went to one guy, I was like, I will pay you money to take my son out and hang out with him. Like, don't tell him that I told you that. I'll deny it. But like having like those kind of mentors in your son and daughter's life, I think is huge as well.
No doubt.
I think Liz is trying to get a message to you right now, Steve. And so
yes, I've heard that I'm an 8-wing-7.
There you go.
What do I call it? Liziogram. That's what I let her figure out who I am. So
that's
so funny. That's my Enneagram 2, 8-wing-7.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I tied. I was a perfect tie where the test said you were either a 7 with an 8-wing or an 8 with a 7-wing. I'm like,
how funny.
I know what I am. Okay, cool. Yeah. I guess it depends on how much caffeine I have on any given day. I don't know.
Right, exactly.
But Steve, this has been so helpful. So much practical advice here, so much godly wisdom, and thank you for just investing not only in those that were with us live today, but also for those that will watch the video back later on a Facebook or YouTube, or maybe they'll listen back on a podcast. And how can people get in touch with you, Steve, if they want to follow up with you and just ask you more questions or dialogue on this topic with you?
I am on Facebook, and I'm on. My team's going to be laughing that I mentioned anything social media, because, and then my email. Do you want me to put that stuff in there?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Go for it.
I'll put that in there as far as that goes. But, man, I hate. People around me know how I hate being the expert. I just am like, these are all things I've learned because I've had to work on them, and I'm still working on them. But I would love to have conversation. It's one of my favorite things to talk about, because I will tell you, it's not genuinely this job. Youth pastors' kids, we celebrate that. We want them to, even in youth ministry, I remember thinking, if I can get this kid to get through here, have a happy marriage and family, and love God, the rest will take care of itself. But so many are coming from that broken space. So anyway,
yeah, absolutely.
I will up. Oh, there's some stuff.
I just put it. I put it in there for while you were talking.
I appreciate it.
And Liz is saying, don't try to find you on Instagram because your last post was 2 years ago. So we'll just.
I love that.
I celebrated. I think I got over 10 pictures on whatever you do on Instagram.
You hit double digits on posts. That's like, amazing.
Yes. So
that is so funny.
Peter, you know when we were in Africa, so Kirby St. John and I are kind of similar in that he might even be worse than I am. We took a bunch of pictures in Africa of us looking at things that people would take pictures of. So it was a picture of us. Here we are looking at elephants. Here we are looking at the giraffes.
It was awesome.
It was such a
so good. So good.
Anyway.
Oh man, this is great, guys. Thanks for a great conversation. And just again, a lot of practical advice, godly wisdom. This is wonderful. Steve's email is there in the comments. So if you want to drop him a note, ask him a question. He is the expert, right, on all things family, not all things LeBron, though. Don't ask him any questions about.
We could talk about that for a while.
Yeah, right. He's like, no, bring it on, please, ask me your questions. Really, I really want to. But well, listen, those of you that are still with us, thanks for joining us today for LTG Live. We're excited. We'll be back again with you next week on Wednesday at noon. Reggie Dowse will be with us. We're excited about that conversation. We've got a lot of great guests lined up for the rest of this season 2, which will take us into about the second week of December or so. And so thanks for joining us today. Once again, this is brought to you by leadthegeneration.com. Feel free to check out our website, see what we do, what we're all about. And if you want to catch this again on a podcast, you can find us at LTG Live Podcast on both Apple and Spotify, and maybe some other platforms in there as well. I'm not sure. A bunch of you guys are saying thank you, and we appreciate you guys being with us. Thanks so much. Awesome. Peter, I'll see you. I feel like I need to mail you a LeBron jersey, but
dude,
maybe we should chip in. Coming. We should chip in and send one to Steve and try to get him to wear it. That's what I'm thinking right there.
Return to sender.
Return to sender. It's going back. I do not want it. So, guys, thanks so much for joining us today. And
You guys are the
we'll
best.
see a bunch of you next week. All right.
Yeah.